Welcome, everyone. Good evening. This is Grid Live Wrap-Up. I'm Matthew Bro. Joining me tonight are Amanda Kaufman, Ben Schneider, and Colby Lambeth from the Podium Finish. We conclude our super busy weekend with 9 races across 5 different series with a full recap of all the action you may have missed. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters and sponsors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, and David. You too can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon each month, or maybe a one-time donation through Buy Me a Coffee, as these fine folks have done so as well. Thank you to all of them. We really appreciate it. Be sure to stick around until the end of the show because we are revealing week 1 of the 2023 Grid Ranking. So in all reality, it is a big night here at Grid Network. Which racer will be at the top to kick off our 2023 season? Find out and stay tuned. We had Formula 1, MotoGP, Supercars, NASCAR, INDYCAR. They all had a lot going on. But first, we'll start with the controversial ending of the Formula 1 Australian Grand Prix.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, we had 5 caution periods, 3 safety cars, 2 virtual safety cars, 3 red flags, and a controversial finish that left almost half the field crashed after a late caution. Sounds like NASCAR at COTA, but no, it's Formula 1 at Melbourne as it left the record-sized crowd cheering, but at what cost? In the end, a record number of fans in attendance waited 30 minutes to see the race end under a safety car anyway. Considering options F1 could have used, such as ending the race under a safety car, virtual safety car, or even a red flag and calling the race completed there, officials elected to try something different. Esteban Ocon in particular was not happy, calling the midfield driver suicidal after the last restart crash. Kobe and Amanda, what are your thoughts on this race? Did the stewards focus too much on entertainment and not utilize all options available?
Well, Ben, I'll start off talking about the race itself. I thought the start was pretty exciting with both Mercedes, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton able to get by the Red Bull and Max Verstappen. And too bad the Mercedes, although they had a much better weekend compared to Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, unfortunately the car is still not there to fight the Red Bull. We're probably all hoping that Russell and Hamilton were going to be able to hold Max at bay for a while, but you know, unfortunately, that Red Bull is just too dang good. And once Max Verstappen ended up getting to the lead, that clean air, it was game over, and that was basically it for the remainder of the race. So the race at the front was obviously kind of a snoozer for the rest of the way. But we had a lot of great racing in the midfield all throughout. Great battle. I thought the racing down there was really decent, but you know, at the end, it seemed like Formula 1 tried to put entertainment over the integrity of the sport and try to do a green-white checkered finish. And guess what? They still didn't get the finish that they wanted, just a whole bunch of confusion and chaos like we saw in Abu Dhabi. I understand you want to give people their money's worth, give all the spectators, wherever you're watching around the world, a green flag finish. But unfortunately, sometimes, you know, you just have to cut your losses in behind the safety car. I promise that we could live with this race and then behind the safety car under the yellow flag. But unfortunately, as we've seen in other forms of motorsports as well, we're really starting to move towards more of an emphasis on entertainment than integrity of the sport. And I think you have to have the correct balance of both. You have to balance integrity of the sport and the entertainment value, but I feel like a lot of the time it's not balanced correctly. And in this case, I feel like Formula 1 really chose the entertainment factor. And like I said, they still didn't get what they wanted. Just a whole bunch of cars torn up unnecessarily. Like, what are we doing this for?
Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that, Kobe. I won't lie. I was definitely thoroughly entertained, and I think that it added a good bit of excitement there at the end. And then just in what I've been seeing after the race, I think there may have potentially even been some information that we didn't receive publicly from the FIA or the race stewards, and explaining why they chose to pull out the red flag so late. But it looked like they were experiencing some security concerns and track invasions, with some people even being able to reach climbing the barriers and reaching cars that were still on track. And there were fans on track while cars were going around under the red flag. So I'm not sure if it was the first or a second red flag. It wasn't clear from the video I saw from shot from a fan perspective, but I think that might have added to their reasoning for red flagging the session outside of the entertainment value. But yeah, I think there's definitely a balance to be found. If of course safety wasn't really a concern there in terms of whether or not the fans were actually over the barrier and interfering with the race. If so, obviously it makes sense why they went with that decision to pull out the red flag so late in the race. But after the chaos, I think it's definitely speaks to the need for balance in having an entertaining race, and then also understanding that how hard it would be for drivers to adapt so late in the race under those conditions.
Well, good to see Luis Torres in the chat here. Auto Rocket Racing 94. The F1 race was a farce, peak officiating problem, and all red flags didn't need to happen. That's my 2 cents. Well, of course, we know how Luis keeps track of all the red flags. I'm sure he was hard at work tracking this one this weekend. Casey Campbell says, I had the correct podium today. And I'll get to that in a second as well in terms of how I was following this race. And Adam Lemery says, as they say, Red Bull gives you wings. So, I wanted to stay up for this race. I was dealing with a lot of fatigue yesterday. I barely made it through the second Final Four game, and I said I'm prioritizing my health and sleep over staying up until 3 a.m. to watch this F1 race. So I woke up. The first thing I saw was the results, and I said, okay, Verstappen wins. Alonso's on the podium. Hamilton's up there with Mercedes. It must have been a pretty boring, straightforward race, right? Well, it turns out, I guess I missed quite a lot there at the end. And I think, it's fitting that it happened this weekend after what we saw in the truck race yesterday, which of course we'll talk a lot more about on Encore tomorrow, and after what we saw this afternoon with the IndyCar race. This seems to be one of the hottest topics in motorsports right now, because it's not just a NASCAR thing now either. We saw it at IndyCar's Indianapolis 500 last year when they threw the red flag to get a 2-lap shootout, which again, they couldn't even finish the race under green there either. So this to me, I mean, I don't need to explain how I feel about NASCAR overtime, F1 trying to, not do overtime here by extending the race, but trying to get a green flag finish by putting the red flag out when we probably didn't need the red flag to come out. I'm not sure. That's the first I'm hearing about those fan concerns there. And let me just say, if any fans are listening to this, if you're ever considering running out onto a hot racetrack, please don't. That's one of the dumbest things that you can do. But I just think that there needs to be, like you said, Kobe, there needs to be a mix of trying to maximize the entertainment factor by putting on a good show without turning it into, as what Luis said in the chat here, a complete farce by trying to manufacture entertainment with a green flag finish and doing something that half the time doesn't even get you that green flag finish because they'll wreck on the restart when they're all bunched up anyway. So, I didn't get to see the race live, obviously, like I was mentioning, but from what I understand, I was just trying to read up on it this afternoon to get ready for the show. I still don't know, but I have the full story straight. I mean, it's just absolute confusion and chaos. And I will go a little bit deeper into it here as we continue the segment. But I would certainly side with the fans that think that what we saw really can't happen again. And we kind of need to move away from this obsession with finishing the races under green. Because I saw some folks on NASCAR Twitter were disappointed that the IndyCar race finished under yellow. And look, I am too, but I will take a bit of a downer there over safety concerns and a similar farce to what we saw in the F1 race any day, and safety concerns as well. So we'll get into more here as we continue on. We'll go through several big losers from the big crash on the last restart, which include Alpine. Both their cars crashed into each other and went from having 2 cars in the points to no cars in the points. Ferrari lost Charles Leclerc on lap 1 and would have had Sainz in 5th until that final restart. With the restart and a 5-second penalty under a safety car, no points for Ferrari. But Alonso was given his place back as if the lap didn't happen, but Sainz got the penalty. Earlier in the race, when Albon crashed out, Russell, Sainz, and several others pitted, lost track position. Then the red flag came out, neutralizing the field, and their advantage was gone. Now, Kobe, we know that we have a race director, race stewards in each race, officials monitoring all this. Who has the final say on the race status, and does this chaos set a new precedent going forward?
I think chaos is an understatement, because there's so many things that was going on in this race, and and I'll be honest, Ben, I still don't completely understand everything that happened in that Formula One race. That's how confusing it was. But according to our F1 analyst Joshua Birch, the race director always has the final say over a Grand Prix or weekend session. However, every single time a red flag is displayed and a race is unable to end normally, they must write a report to the World Motorsport Council to explain the reasons for the red flag and why it couldn't be concluded. Since 2019, standing restarts have been introduced to restart the race easier. So unless the track is wet, the race will restart with 5 lights. This rule cannot easily be changed as a part of the F1 sporting regulations and essential to weekend procedures. Now it's no longer the case of 75% cutoff time, and if the race can be restarted at any lap, it must be attempted in accordance with the rules. Otherwise, an investigation is set up as to why not. So they actually followed the rules today, but they need to be more clearly set out because confusion is certainly not a good look for Formula One.
Well, if the rules were actually followed today, maybe the rules need, revamp as well. Because like you and I were both saying, Kobe, I mean, I think you're right. Chaos is an understatement. We're still trying to figure this out here. Almost 24 hours later with the race taking place so early in the morning here on the East Coast. It's almost been a full day since the race took place. So still a lot to consider there. And I'm sure there'll be some deep talks within the FIA and within Formula One going forward as to what the new precedent is going to be. Now, one driver that had the most miserable day perhaps was Charles Leclerc. He started the race, lasted 3 corners, and then went out. Last year, he won this race and left with a 46-point lead over Max Verstappen, who was 6th in the points at the time. Boy, how the tides turned in that championship battle. Now Leclerc is 10th in the points, level with Haas's Nico Hülkenberg, and Max, of course, looking hard to beat. Amanda, we know it's a long season, but could this race doubt in Charles Leclerc's mind with Ferrari about their chances to win this championship?
Yeah, another bad day for Charles and a horrible day for Ferrari as well. With Charles even calling when speaking about his start to the season, he called it the worst start to the season ever in post-race interviews, which I think is a fair evaluation. But to remember, if we throw it back just to even a year ago, with Red Bull had issues in the beginning that caused early DNFs for their drivers. So it's not uncommon for teams to have some kinks to work out. I think today, unfortunately, was a little bit more of driver error on Charles's side, or just being caught up in a racing incident. But I definitely think that there is a little bit of space for doubt to creep in his mind, in terms of seeing Max already pull such a huge lead in the championship so early on. But I think that like we said, it's a long season and he definitely has time to come back from this and hopefully turn things around with the next race. So hopefully he's able to move past Australia and set his mind on the races to come and turn things around.
Well, and one Maurice asked in the chat, would you want to see the Aussie Grand Prix at night? That's been discussed. I guess I'll hand it over to Kobe and Amanda first, and then I can give my thoughts on this one. But what do you all think?
Well,
yeah.
You want to go ahead, Amanda?
Sure, I'll go quickly here. I would say I'm a big fan of night races. I think it'd be interesting, considering that tire degradation isn't really an issue at the Australian circuit, as we saw pretty evidently today. And I think that making it a night race would maybe even eliminate even more of that element. So I think that to keep things interesting, it might be in their best interest to leave it as a day race. But I'd be interested to see maybe once or twice how a night race would work in Australia, understanding they have a really long contract. I think it's like until 2037 or something, the longest contract of any racetrack in the series. So there's space, there's time to do it.
Yeah, certainly the Australian Grand Prix is not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. I'm very open-minded. If they want to try a night race, why not? I'm definitely for it. Whether they want to run it day or night, I don't really care or have a preference. Whether they run the Australian Grand Prix at Albert Park during the day or at night. But in regards to start times, I'm a night owl, so actually like the 1 a.m. start time because I get to stay up to watch that, and then I get to go to sleep. But if it's a night race, that's going to start pushing it to early morning, and I'm not a morning person at all. So So like in terms of a night race, I would really hate that element of it. But whatever they want to do, I'm down for it.
I was going to say the exact opposite for the exact opposite reasons. I think 1 a.m. starting to push it a little bit. I'd rather have a 6 or 7 a.m. Start time. I think, our friends over in the UK who were complaining about having to set the alarms early. I will take that over trying to stay up until 3 in the morning to watch an F1 race. The worst one was Malaysia. When they did Malaysia, I remember it was my freshman year of college. I think the last year that they had that race, that was a 3 a.m. start time, and I made the mistake of staying up for that one. It was 5:30 before I was crawling into bed. I probably should have just gone to bed at like 8 a.m. and set my alarm for 3 a.m. there. But, in terms of the start time factor for the rest of the world, it might be a little bit easier. You might draw more of a worldwide audience if the race isn't taking place in the overnight hours here in the United States or the early mornings over in Europe. So that would certainly be something to consider there. But then again, there is the factor of, how does this affect tire degradation and things like that? How does it affect the actual on-track product? So, I'm sure there are pros and cons to it. I'm sure they're going to continue to consider it. Maybe they try it 1 year and maybe it doesn't work out and they go back to making it a day race, or who knows what's going to happen. But I think that, it's certainly something that's worth considering. Well, let's move on now. Aston Martin is a team worth talking about here. The other team to have both cars in their points today, besides Red Bull, third and fourth, and still second in the constructors. So Amanda, Kobe, I'll pass this on to both of you. 3 races in. Is Aston Martin the real deal, and can they hang on to second in the constructors?
Absolutely. I think that if there were any doubts before, Aston Martin definitely proved today that they have the race pace. They're here to stay. They're really up there running with the top 3, way ahead of Ferrari at this point, understanding that obviously Ferrari has had a tough start to the season. But I think for Aston Martin to hang on to second, they just need to continue to keep their cars clean and be able to get both drivers to have consistent results. I think what it's going to come down to between Aston Martin and Mercedes is their second drivers, which for Mercedes, identifying George Russell as the second driver, even if that might be a little unfair to him. And then Lance Stroll is obviously Aston Martin's second driver. I think if you put those two head to head, Russell comes out slightly ahead. So I think it'll be interesting to see how things progress throughout the season. But I think that for now, Aston Martin is definitely solidly in the fight.
Yeah, certainly Aston Martin is definitely in the fight, and Fernando Alonso, it's been really nice to see him move over to Aston Martin and have this type of immediate success. And as we've been saying in previous shows, Fernando Alonso is usually on the losing end of the equation when he switches a team. He goes to a team that's not necessarily running well, and then the team he just left, they have a rising performance, and this time I think Fernando Alonso is a true winner by moving over to Aston Martin, and I certainly think that they are the real deal. I think they can really fight Mercedes all throughout the season to be second in the constructors. It was really interesting seeing how Mercedes qualifying pace just came out of nowhere this weekend, and we'll certainly be keeping a close eye on the silver arrows to see if Mercedes can keep this going on later in later races throughout the season. I know Mercedes is really anxiously anticipating this new update that's going to be coming in the next few races.
I feel like Seth Davis when he sharpied in Virginia right before they lost to UMBC, when he sent that tweet out after the tip-off. This is my version of that, I think. Thinking back to what I said last year about Fernando Alonso's prospects with Aston Martin, who have been a midfield team the last couple of years. It's been great to see him back up at the front of the field where he belongs, and great to see Aston Martin as well, fighting for podiums, and maybe they'll even be in the mix for a win here if Red Bull have a weekend where they have reliability issues. We'll see what happens, but Aston Martin certainly seemed to be the real deal. It doesn't look like it was just a race one fluke and then they came back down to earth. This looks like a real true resurgence for both the team and the driver, Fernando Alonso, and even Lance Stroll as well has put in some good drives, and coming off the injuries he sustained shortly before the season began. It's been really good to see. Well, the next race is in Azerbaijan, Baku's city circuit, in 4 weeks' time. It'll be the first sprint race weekend of 2023. Many consider it the most unpredictable track in Formula One. Some even call it F1's version of Talladega. Kobe, considering Red Bull's fast straight line speed, are they the early favorite, or do you think Baku's unpredictability and this race that we just saw will serve as an example of what could be another crazy race?
whenever we head to Baku for the race in Azerbaijan, it always seems to produce a crazy race. So considering how great the Red Bull is now and those long straights they have on the Baku City Street Circuit, I think Red Bull is definitely going to be the overall favorite to win, whether it's Max Verstappen or Sergio Perez. I certainly think Red Bull has to be very excited that this Grand Prix is going to be coming up because they are insane in a straight line, and it's not even close. So I certainly think that they're looking forward to another great day where they could potentially get both drivers up on the podium this time, and certainly have to give a call to Sergio Perez for that big turnaround he had in the race compared to Saturday, where nothing went right in free practice 3, and then he went out in Q1 in qualifying, and to be able to get up into the points and have a basically mistake-free race. He certainly has to be something that he's proud of.
Yeah, I'd have to agree that with Baku coming up, I think that Redline's definitely the favorite, but it'll come down to, as always, just the strategy. And I think there's a little bit of unpredictability still on the table in terms of in that area. But I think that overall, it's pretty safe to say that Red Bull's the favorite, especially with Checo being considered and nicknamed the King of the Streets. So I think that this is a Red Bull's race to lose. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. And I think a lot of it will come down to qualifying.
Well, no doubt. I think they have to be considered the favorite, but of course it's called unpredictable for a reason. So we'll just have to wait and see there. Well, Kobe, now I'll hand it over to you as we shift gears and move over to MotoGP.
Yeah, we're going to do a brief recap of the MotoGP race. It was the Grand Prix of Argentina, and this race was held under wet conditions. At the start, Marco Bezzecchi from the front row took the lead, had a flawless race, and ended up getting his first career MotoGP Grand Prix win with less than 10 laps to go. Pecco Bagnaia slid out of control while in second place, damaged the bike, and was off the pace. So Bezzecchi for VR46 Mooney Racing, he's the championship points leader after just 2 races. And yesterday, Brad Binder won the sprint race from 15th to 1st. It looked like he pushed it for the win yesterday. He wasn't a contender in the race of today. And Joan Mir, the 2020 MotoGP world champion, wasn't in contention either. Mir was declared unfit medically with injuries suffered from the sprint racing, yet another rider out. So only 17 riders end up taking the start today. And the next race for MotoGP is going to be on April 16th. So just coming up in a couple of weeks at Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. And next we're going to bring Matthew Brodie back in as we talk about the highly entertaining NTT INDYCAR Series race at Texas.
Absolutely. And I noticed both of the races we just covered, they're taking a little bit of a week to 2 week to 4 week break. So that's very interesting to see. But the NTT INDYCAR race at Texas, probably the best race of the weekend, some may argue. The PPG 375, aka the 375 at Texas Motor Speedway. It ended under caution when Roman Grosjean crashed on the second to last lap of the race. Josef Newgarden took the white and caution flag together and held off a hard racing Pato O'Ward and a field of competitors. And we even saw a little bit of pack racing today. Side-by-side passing, both lines were working, even 3-wide racing as well. Kobe, yesterday you brought up the additional downforce, the high line practice, and the potential for this pack racing that we saw today. Were you surprised by the on-track product? It looked like Texas from before the reconfiguration from a few years back.
Well, I'm not surprised that they were able to use the high line and make passes. We saw it in last year's race, but I will admit I'm surprised how closely the cars were able to run together. I wouldn't say it was a true pack race like we've seen in previous IndyCar races, but certainly we had a small pack up towards the front, swapping the lead back and forth, running side by side. I think IndyCar has definitely hit on something here at Texas Motor Speedway with the highline practice to get the Firestone rubber into the track to get that second groove going. And also this year, unlike last year and the year before that, we really saw a lot of confidence from the drivers. I remember when Texas Motor Speedway tried to remove the PJ1 from the track and it just didn't work out. It was like ice up there, so it was basically just a one groove track. And when a car tried to move up there, yeah, they washed up the track and had to get way out of the gas. But since then, trying their best to put on a great racing product at Texas Motor Speedway, it really seems like they've done something with this. And the IndyCar Series put on a really, really great show, and it was we had a lot of action all throughout the race. It didn't seem too difficult to pass, and I think the fans who did go to the race certainly got their money's worth here, because I think it was an A+ show, or some people like to say chef's kiss.
Yeah, I actually just saw a tweet from David Land, who was on site covering the race this weekend. He said, Josef Newgarden just said that Jimmy Johnson is the reason you saw IndyCars 2 and 3 wide today. The high lines he ran here last year gave the IndyCar drivers the confidence to do it this year. So how about Jimmy Johnson leaving a little bit of legacy in the IndyCar Series? But I got to tell you, I was moderately surprised. I know that there was a lot of conversation going into this weekend that we could see a bit of a pack race. Again, I don't think we saw anything like a God forbid, Vegas 2011 situation or Fontana 2015 situation there. Heck, you saw how fast Pato O'Ward was. Probably, arguably, should have won the race with how dominant he looked for much of it there. But especially in light of a Truck Series race that we saw yesterday, in the last couple of NASCAR races we've gotten there, and a few of the races that we've gotten since the reconfiguration, certainly surprised that the show was as good as we saw today. And I think undoubtedly, without question, the best race post reconfiguration in the history of Texas Motor Speedway, whether it's NASCAR, IndyCar, or whatever. Really, really solid race today. The only bummer is that there weren't more fans in the stands to see it. So, I know the weather forecast didn't look great, but they did end up getting the full race in. And, I think IndyCar needs to step up the marketing, because what we saw today was really, really spectacular.
Definitely, I can agree with that. It's almost like a breath of fresh air to see a race like that at Texas Motor Speedway, especially since the reconfiguration. However, there might have been a driver who didn't have that same breath of fresh air. That would have been Alexander Rossi, who was handed a penalty when he made contact with Kyle Kirkwood, who was entering his pit box. I'm going to throw this one to you again, Kobe. Most people sound convinced that it shouldn't have been a penalty. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, Matthew, I have to say one thing. Alexander Rossi is certainly not happy, because the first 3 words he put on Twitter after the race was what a waste. And I know it has to be frustrating for him, because Aero McLaren brought 3 fast rocket ships to Texas Motor Speedway, and also unfortunate for Felix Rosenqvist getting up there in the marbles and crashing out of the race as well. Certainly a frustrating day for those 2 Aero McLaren drivers. But in regards to the penalty, I do agree with what the NBC broadcasters were saying, because Kyle Kirkwood, he was like 3 lanes over, and he basically went from lane 3 all the way over to lane 1 as Rossi was trying to exit his pits. Yeah, but still, at the end of the day, Kyle Kirkwood ended up retiring from the race. Things didn't go his way either. So I guess that's a penalty within itself for Kirkwood, that things didn't pan out the way he had expected. But certainly I understand why Alexander Rossi was frustrated. A guy who's 3 lanes over is trying to get into his box while he's trying to exit, and it seemed like Rossi had the right of way there.
Yeah, I was really confused when they handed that penalty down to Rossi, considering that Kirkwood basically had to what looked like a really late move into his box, almost even missing his box, that caused the collision with Rossi, whose team really had no time to react or warn him, considering that Kirkwood was 3 lanes over and on the outside in a lane that's typically used just for leaving the pits, whereas the middle lane would typically be used for those entering the pit box, and kind of give that warning to his team so that they could have reacted and held him for a second longer. But yeah, I think that's definitely a strange one and tough for Rossi, for sure.
Definitely. And then let us know in the chat room as well how you feel about that penalty. And during this race, we're going to switch back. So Alexander Rossi not have had the best luck. Someone who you might say had great luck, but at the same time didn't, was Pato O'Ward, and his teams were at odds with his strategy, including asking him to even save fuel while everyone else was racing pretty much as hard as they could. We know he was upset after the St. Pete race, after an issue with the car left him frustrated very late during that race. I'm going to throw this one to Ben. Now that O'Ward is the points leader, could the team use this as a motivation entering Long Beach?
Absolutely. And I know Pato's been very hard on himself following each of these races, knowing that Had things gone slightly differently, he could have come out with 2 wins probably to start the year. But he's still the points leader, and the team looks great. So I think that there's absolutely positive momentum that they can take into the rest of the season here. I know it's still very early, but it certainly looks like they're the car and the team to beat when you put these 2 races together on 2 very different tracks, and to see how strong O'Ward has been at both of them, even though he came up short both times of getting the ultimate goal, which is a win. I think it's absolutely going to be good motivation for them to go out there and continue performing like they have. And if they keep racing like this, if O'Ward keeps racing like this, it's inevitable they're going to get at least a couple of wins eventually.
Yeah, I'd have to agree that the results don't necessarily tell the full story of the race, in that Pato definitely could have come out with this win, being that Aero and McLaren brought super fast cars this weekend and in the last race. But yeah, I think that understanding that he, I could understand how it would be super frustrating for him to feel like the win had just slipped through his fingers, just in the end of both races. But I think it's definitely a consolation for him to be leading the points and know that he has a fast car behind him.
Yeah, I feel like if you have these issues about running up front for the first 2 races of the season, definitely gives you a confidence boost no matter what. And 22 of the 28 cars finished the race today. I believe only 7 of them were on the lead lap, completing all 250. Sato went out early when making contact with the outside wall. All drivers, including Graham Rahal, were okay after a scary wreck with Devlin DeFrancesco. 6 drivers have top 10 finishes in both races so far this season. O'Ward, Ericsson, Dixon, Pelot, Ilott, and David Mulakis. I'm going to throw this one to you first. Amanda, who are the biggest surprises so far after 2 races, looking at those who are off to a good start and those who are not off to a good start, such as Rosenqvist, Grosjean, or Kirkwood, with being involved in crashes in both of these races?
Yeah, the biggest surprises for me would have to be Callum Ilott and David Malukas, both being able to run run really well in both races and start close, stay with the leaders, the typical leaders that we would expect to see, being that they both come from smaller teams, and even though they're both really experienced, really fast drivers behind the wheel, I think for both of them, it's only their second, I believe, season in IndyCar. So yeah, for them to be holding their own and being able to finish in the top 10 for both races so far, I think is a dream start to the season for both of those teams.
And Casey Campbell says that Malukas has really impressed all year. Yes, certainly, and especially dating back to last season. Remember, David Malukas was to win at Gateway, and if he just had 1-2 more laps, he would have gotten there. I really would not be surprised if David Malukas winning his first car race at some point later this year in 2024 could be a really big year for Malukas. Probably going to be one of the hottest free agents on the market. They're certainly going to be calling for David Malukas because he's certainly a really great driver. Yes, but one of my biggest surprises is not going to be just one driver. It's just going to be an entire team. How about Junko's Hollinger Racing? 2 really strong races for Callum Ilott and Agustin Canapino. Callum Ilott certainly continue to grow as a young Indy driver. I really think that he could also be one of the top free agents on the market for a top team if he chooses to make IndyCar his home long term. But Agustin Canapino, I've actually been really shocked how well he's done in IndyCar after 2 races, especially at Texas Motor Speedway, getting a really good finish today. And for a driver who spent basically his entire racing career in Argentina and has no open wheel experience really, and never been on an oval before, and to go out there, not make a mistake, and run with some of the best in the IndyCar series today in treacherous conditions, you definitely have to give Canapino a big call here. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's able to do throughout the rest of the IndyCar season today. And drivers who disappointed, definitely have to say probably Kyle Kirkwood. Last season kind of like a throwaway season since it was his rookie year with one of the backmarker teams. Not a lot of expectations, but when you're driving for Andretti Autosport, the spotlight is certainly going to be on you. And this year, Kyle Kirkwood, if he doesn't get this bad luck out of his system, and doesn't move up higher in the points, a lot of people are going to start talking and wonder if Kirkwood is the right driver for that number 27 Honda. And I know it's just his first year in the IndyCar Series with Andretti Autosport, but like I've been saying in multiple shows in the past, this is what have you done for me lately type of sport, and it really just applies to any sport in general, not just auto racing. So Kirkwood certainly will hope to put St. Pete and Texas behind him and really get his season going. And Roman Grosjean, oh my goodness, looking at him, these first two races could have turned out a lot differently if it wasn't for the contact with McLaughlin in the Firestone Grand Prix, and if it wasn't for that late race crash, we'd be looking at potentially a race winner and 2 top 5 finishes to start off the season, and this certainly is not the start that he'd hoped for.
Absolutely. And just to point out, both of you both mentioned Callum Ilott. Make sure you go to Grid Network on YouTube. Check out some of our staff members did an interview with him ahead of the Texas Motor Speedway race that we just witnessed today. As we near 600 subscribers, when you go to find that video later tonight or whenever you see this, make sure you click that subscribe button as well. So we just finished the NTT INDYCAR Series race. We had the most recent race, I believe we're going to be discussing right now.
Thank you, Matthew. The NASCAR Cup Series had their Toyota Owners 400 at Richmond Raceway just this afternoon. It was a battle between Hendrick Motorsports and Joe Gibbs Racing. William Byron took stage 1. Denny Hamlin was the stage 2 winner. Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, and Martin Truex Jr. were also in the mix throughout the race. A late race caution set up the money stop on pit road. Larson's crew performed a great pit stop and got him the lead, surviving 2 late race restarts to get the number 5 team its first win of the season after coming close a couple of times earlier this year. So, Amanda, I'll start with you. After his teammate William Byron won at Las Vegas, the 24-1 next weekend at Phoenix, can Larson use the momentum from winning Richmond and put the 5 back into victory lane for a second consecutive race at the Bristol Dirt Track?
Yeah, I think Larson will definitely be carrying some momentum into Bristol, but what's tough is being that Bristol is a dirt track, it's going to be a totally different scene, and it'll totally depend on the car that they're able to bring. And I think that there's a good chance that he'll be able to continue running up front like he's been doing all season. But I think that dirt element and it being a night race can just add so many different elements that could shake up the results a little bit. So it'll be exciting to see for sure. But I think that hopefully, yes, Larson can carry some of that momentum to Bristol.
Yeah, and I mean, I can absolutely agree with that. I think what we've seen from Hendrick Motorsports, no matter what you throw at them this season, whether it's getting wrecked late in the race, whether it's penalties that come back and then all of a sudden go back out, I digress about that. Nonetheless, though, talking about motorsport greats too, I think in terms of Kyle Larson's success at dirt, maybe not at Bristol Dirt. I know the first race here didn't have a great day, but then finished in the top 5 last season at this race. It all depends, like just Amanda, like what she just said, in terms of what setup they bring to there. But I think this win, Larson probably is one of those drivers as well who could have won at least for 2 or 3 of these 7 races that we have seen. And unfortunately, he's only gotten 1 for that Hendrick team, and William Byron has taken 2 of them, obviously. But I think what we saw with Byron's momentum going from Vegas to Phoenix, I think we definitely can see that out of Kyle Larson, especially at Bristol Dirt. It's going to be a fun night, I believe, Easter Sunday, very excited. And then Adam Lemery says Kyle Larson is a favorite next Sunday night at Bristol Dirt. I think any sentence that mentions dirt racing, Kyle Larson should come to mind for pretty much anyone in motorsport. I know we'll see someone like Jonathan Davenport as well making his Cup Series debut, Colleague Racing. That'll be a fun sight to see. Obviously, those 2 battle. One day, hopefully, Matt Shepard, dirt driver, can get up there as well. He races with Stuart Friesen. I just wanted to point that out. But nonetheless, I think the Bristol Dirt, when you talk about Kyle Larson, he's got to be one of those favorites. And he can definitely, if anyone can build that momentum, it would be him coming off this weekend.
Well, you mentioned it, Matthew. Anytime you mention dirt, Kyle Larson has to be considered a favorite, and I believe also won at Eldora in the Truck Series several years ago as well. So I don't know how much overlap there's going to be between that and the artificial dirt track, if you will, at Bristol, but certainly someone to keep your eye on for sure. Now let's stick with Hendrick Motorsports right now. William Byron was a contender all race long. After he won the first stage, he became the first driver during the stage racing era to get 5 stage wins in the first 7 races. But towards the end of the race, Byron remaining in contention to win, he got spun out by Christopher Bell on a restart and finished 24th. During today's broadcast, Clint Boyer predicted this could be a major breakout season for Byron, and said the 24 could potentially win 6 to 8 races. Byron already has 2 wins and very well could have picked up win number 3 today at Richmond if the stars had aligned in his favor. Matthew, do you agree with Boyer's prediction of 6 to 8 wins for Byron, or is that too high of a number?
Before I say that, I want to point out, I feel like even though Hendrick Motorsports has been as dominant, I feel like the drivers on this roster, like Alex Bowman, William Byron, are still being severely underrated for what they're bringing to the table. I think 6 to 8 is way too much, in my honest opinion. I think with the next gen era, I think, what do we see, 5 from Logano, 4 from Reddick, at least since the car has started, right? But I don't think William Byron gets that 6 to 8 wins. I think there's too much parity in the field. I mean, if you look at guys who have not won yet, Chastain, Bowman, Harvick, Bell, Blaney, guys like that, Cindric, and then guys who have won last year, obviously Christopher Buescher, Suarez, Bubba Wallace, those guys I feel can still win this season. So I don't know if he'll get to the 8. But, I mean, I would argue if William Byron is consistent, and I'll point this out a little bit later in the show as well, if William Byron can have a run from race 27, start of the playoffs last season, until race 36 of the playoffs last season, where his worst finish, I believe, was like 16th, if he can have a run like that, then I think definitely William Byron can get to maybe 4 or 5 wins. But the problem is he's on arguably the most overpowered team in the sport. Alex Bowman is still dominating yet again, another top 10 finish. Kyle Larson's one of the best drivers in the sport. When Chase Elliott comes back, one of the best drivers in the sport. 2 past champions I just mentioned. So it's going to be kind of like a Red Bull situation. They're going to be competing against each other to see who's going to get it done. So I think there's going to be maybe 6 to 8 combined wins for Hendrick Motorsports, maybe more. I don't think one driver though this season will get that many.
Yeah, I'd have to totally agree with that, Matthew. I think that 6 to 8 is a little steep in terms of for one driver. But I think that I think that he's going to be competing with his own teammates, but also the fact that the field is so close in terms of it really could be, it could go to about 10. There are about 10 drivers that could win most places at most tracks every week, just depending on how the stars align for them. So I think that we've definitely been seeing some dominant performances from William Byron, and it's been exciting to watch him run so close to the front for all of the races so far. But I think that, like Matthew said, Alex Bowman's in the fight too. Then other people who have been a little bit quieter this season, but definitely have wins coming down the line for them, that would definitely eat into that 6 to 8 number for just William Byron. So yeah.
I understand we have a comment. The chat room, NASCAR Fantasy Live asks, what does Barry's journey to Cup look like? NASCAR Fantasy Live, stay tuned. We're going to answer that, I think, or talk about Josh Berry later on here in this segment. And Matthew, I know you and I were discussing this in our group chat as well, so maybe we can go back and forth on what we think the future might hold for Josh Berry as well. Certainly impressed today. We'll get to him in just a moment. But first, let's go back to the Joe Gibbs Racing drivers. The highest finisher was Christopher Bell in 3rd. Bell led some laps today, made contact with Byron late, but the 20 didn't have anything for Kyle Larson and Josh Berry at the end to break up the Hendrick 1-2 finish. A quietly good race for Cup Series rookie Ty Gibbs, finishing in 9th place. Martin Truex Jr. performed well, ran up front. Strategy towards the end cost him some spots, and he finished just outside the top 10 there in P11. But the JGR driver that has to be feeling the most disappointed is Denny Hamlin. His race started off eventful by getting crowded by J.J. Yeley, then spinning out the 15. Hamlin settled down, worked his way to the lead, got the Stage 2 win, and seemed like a true contender for the race win until a disastrous pit stop under green cost him significant time. This put him 16 seconds behind the leader, and then a late race pit road speeding penalty finished him off, leading to a disappointing result of 20th. Amanda, how would you rate the performance of JGR today, and do you see this race as a huge missed opportunity for Denny Hamlin?
Yeah, so I think with the first speeding in the pit lane penalty, I think to see that from a veteran driver was just a bit strange. But I do think that Denny did a great job working his way back up to take home the stage win. But then to have a repeat of that, I think was just irresponsible. And then with the pit crew having a slow stop, there's not as much. That's a little bit out of your control. But I think that it's a huge missed opportunity for Joe Gibbs Racing this week, because it seemed like, especially from Denny's performance in stage 2, that they had a real opportunity to potentially even win this race. So yeah, I think disappointing. I was wearing my Denny Hamlin shirt yesterday. I should have worn it today, maybe instead, and I would have gotten better results. But yeah, definitely a sad day for JGR.
Definitely, and I might be a sad day for Denny, but I might disagree on that. I think they still had a great performance, and I kind of wish you wore the Denny shirt because he was my pick a winner. This is probably one of the most confident I've been besides Tyler Reddick last week, and Denny just unfortunately couldn't get it done. But if you look at Joe Gibbs' results, Christopher Bell 4th, Ty Gibbs yet again for the 3rd straight race is 9th. In fact, that I believe Ty Gibbs is the only driver on a 3-race top 10 streak, and he has finished 9th all the time. And it's funny, if you look at our grid rating, like the full result, which we don't release, I believe Ty Gibbs is still down in like 25th in the grid rating, despite 3 straight top 10 finishes, due to them all being 9th. Truex Jr. had a phenomenal race, something I think severely underrated. Truex Jr. seems to have something happen towards the ends of these races, but he was running up front most of the day in 11th. Denny Hamlin's 20th place finish, though, is something very unfortunate. I think towards the end of the race, all the Toyotas, except maybe Ty Gibbs, seemed to start collapsing. Tyler Reddick spun out. Bubba Wallace had his penalty where he had to do the pass-through, got stuck a lap down. Denny Hamlin slow pit stop, plus numerous penalties. Truex Jr. just seemed to fall off when he had to put on those scuff tires. Christopher Bell made the dive. He later apologized to Byron, which caused Byron to spin out. And then Ty Gibbs just quietly finishing 9th, earning some stage points for him. So I wouldn't say it's like a disappointing day, considering all 4 cars still finished in the top 20. However, this is definitely a huge, huge missed opportunity for Denny Hamlin, considering in terms of Richmond, you always put him towards the front, and he unfortunately finished the worst of that team. And then to NASCAR Fantasy Life says, basically the phrase shot himself in the foot describes Denny's day. I can't argue with what NASCAR Fantasy Life said. I mean, you run up front all day and then unfortunately get stuck with some penalties, finish 20th. So things happen. Long race ago, long season. Denny Hamlin's one of the best Toyotas in the field. I'm sure he can get a win soon. I would have thought, though, it would have come today.
I don't know. Maybe I used up all my pick a winner luck in our Grid Network tournament challenge there. I still have UConn winning the whole thing, and I think I've clinched it by virtue of them still being in it. Everyone else's national champion is out, although I did pick Iowa to win the women's tournament, so I guess congratulations to San Diego State on your national championship that you'll win tomorrow, because that's just my luck. But we'll move on here. Before we move on to our Supercar segment, let's shine the spotlight on 2 drivers who had particularly strong runs today. All things considered, Josh Berry took his number 9 Chevrolet to a 2nd place finish thanks to a great strategy call late in the race. The short track standout has been filling in for Chase Elliott on the ovals, and today he made the most of his opportunity to drive a NASCAR Cup Series car. The second driver is Chandler Smith, who finished in 17th place on his Cup debut. He attempted the Daytona 500 at the start of the year, but failed to qualify. Moving to Cup competition is, of course, a big step, especially nowadays with the cars being so different than the Xfinity car, but he won in yesterday for Colleague Racing, and of course more on that on the Encore show tomorrow. Smith completed all 400 laps and worked his way into the top 20 methodically without putting a wheel wrong all day. A great day for the Xfinity regular, while his 2 full-time teammates struggled. AJ Allmendinger finished 27th, while Justin Haley was 2 spots back in 29th. Matthew, was this the type of performance you expected out of Josh Berry at Richmond, and what does Chandler Smith's strong run in his Cup debut say about his potential as a driver?
Okay, I think I have a little more to say about Berry, so I'll start with Chandler Smith. I think Chandler Smith is arguably one of the most underrated drivers in the sport. I know I throw that a lot, that phrase underrated. But if you look at his success with KBM coming to Colleague Racing, being up front, unfortunately had a couple races you feel like Kyle Larson did too in the Cup level where he could have won them, but unfortunately didn't get it done. Finally got it done yesterday. I think Chandler Smith can be a great thing. I think he might need a little bit of time in the Xfinity. Yet, granted, he's 20, so he's younger than me, so I really don't have much to say. But at the same time, Chandler Smith, he's doing great things. I think with a couple more years development, maybe if Colleague Racing gets a third car out of it, because I feel like Allmendinger and Haley will be there for a little bit. Chandler Smith in that 13 car can definitely do great things, especially no practice, no qualifying. Something we saw like during the COVID years, we saw some rookies, like a little unexpected performances. But Chandler Smith really did a phenomenal job, in my opinion, running like quietly. I don't think he was talked about much, but he was slowly but surely getting through there, making it to the top 20. But Josh Berry, I know we discussed this a little earlier. I don't know if anyone expected him to finish second, but what an incredible show by Josh Berry. Absolutely phenomenal in his sense. Dale Jr. is definitely was up in his seat, jumping wherever he may have been during this race, because I believe Josh Berry is Dale Jr.'s protege. Got it done. He's really showing he's got a lot of talent up there, finishing second in just, I believe, his 6th career Cup Series race. The problem is I don't know where Berry's going to go. I think Chevrolet, they're not a lot of the strongest seats, though, in the Cup level. We saw Gragson dominate in the Xfinity Series, go to Legacy Motor Club before I believe it became Legacy Motor Club. Isn't doing too hot despite being great in junior motorsports equipment. So what does Josh Berry do here? Does he stay in the Xfinity Series till something opens up? Because Hendrick Motorsports has all their drivers locked down for a little bit now. And I remember asking Corey LaJoie something on Twitter I've told us about, saying would he rather stay in Spire Motorsports equipment when he finished near 30th, or would he rather go down to the Xfinity Series in great equipment, say junior motorsports? And he replied to me something along the lines like if you're not racing in the Cup Series, that's one less race you will ever get in the Cup Series. So I don't know what this is going to be. If Dale Jr. gets a charter, he says he doesn't want Josh Berry because he doesn't want to see him struggle through that development with the new team. I mean, Josh Berry, 2010, when he signed for late models with Junior Motorsports, out of nowhere. I mean, 13 years later, look at him and the success he's had. I'm sure he could probably win a Cup race when he gets to that Cup level full time. Just not sure when that will be or how it will come about. I don't know if he'll switch manufacturers. He's been with Chevrolet quite a while. But if something opens up, does Josh Berry take it to maybe go to a team 20th to 30th in points, or does he wait it out and continue to be a top 8 contender week in and week out with Junior Motorsports? I don't know. Maybe Amanda might want to answer that question as well, but it's exciting. I love to see driver development. He's no rookie by any stretch of the imagination. He's up in I believe he's Joey Logano's age, as they mentioned on the Xfinity broadcast. So I'll stop talking now, rambling. I'll throw it back to Amanda for your same question. But
yeah, Matthew, I have to agree with you. I don't know where he would necessarily go, but I think that today's performance was definitely a good showing for his resume, wherever he does end up. I think that no, I definitely didn't expect him to be running at the top, or even potentially it looked for a few laps there that he could pull off the win here. But I think it was great to see that out of Josh Berry. And then for Chandler Smith, yeah, he didn't get a lot of coverage during the race, but I did see him creeping up the order, just making up positions, which was great to see for someone who just hopped in the car like that. So yeah, I think it's good to see some of the potential future talents in the Cup Series perform so well today.
Hey, there's no shame in being Justin Allgaier. You know, if that's the best ride you've got and you're a championship contender in the Xfinity Series, I don't think there's any shame in racing on Saturdays and building a career for yourself, making a name for yourself in that series, or in the truck series like Matt Crafton has done. Ron Hornaday is a Hall of Famer, deservedly so. But so and Matthew, I know, again, we were talking about this before we came on the air. If I'm Josh Berry, do I really want to drive a Spire Cup Series car if that's my only Cup option that I could run full time, and give up driving for my friend and my boss, the guy who, gave me this wonderful opportunity at Junior Motorsports and Dale Earnhardt Jr., when I could be competing for wins and championships there? And, again, I don't want to talk down too much on Spire, but the reality is, I haven't seen the potential for them to take that step forward. Whereas, with Legacy Motor Club, obviously you got the investment from Jimmy Johnson now. They have some solid funding with their 2-car teams. It really looks like there's a lot of energy in that program. It might not lead to championships this year or even 3 years from now, but Gregson's still young. There's an opportunity to continue to build that program. I just don't know if I've seen that same kind of energy out of Spire over the last few years. So it could be there. It could be an opportunity. And if Josh Berry wants it and has the opportunity to take it, God bless him. I wouldn't, tell him that he's making a fool out of himself doing that or anything. But I'm just saying, if I were in his shoes, I think I would choose being a title contender for Junior Motorsports in the Xfinity Series. But this run today that he had in Chase Elliott's number 9 car certainly proved that if he got a full-time Cup opportunity in good equipment, gets more races under his belts, and continues to improve as a driver with these next-gen cars, but he could potentially even turn into a race-winning, championship contending driver in the Cup Series as well. So I think that there's certainly a lot of potential there, as there is, of course, for Chandler Smith. I mean, he did a phenomenal job today. I know colleague hasn't done so well at Richmond in their young Cup Series lifespan that they've had. So I wasn't expecting to see too much out of either of their full-time cars today either, but certainly wasn't expecting Chandler Smith to be the highest finishing of the three. So that was a fantastic run for him. And I think Mike Joy mentioned this on the broadcast in the closing laps, a weekend that he's not going to forget for a long, long time. So great to see both of those drivers up there, contending, a little bit higher than we might have expected them to going into this weekend. And Adam Lemery's totally agree with what Josh Berry did today. Was definitely awesome. Matthew, I'll hand it back over to you real quick before we head into Supercars here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can agree with that. I mean, the closest I'll ever be to a NASCAR driver is the NASRAC Racing League. I race in every Saturday night on my PS4 NASCAR Heat 5 if the servers continue to stay out nonetheless. But I'll be as fast as Xfinity 10G right here when I say this. I think it's going to be a tough thing. Ty Dillon is still behind Chase Elliott in points despite racing, I believe, 5 more races. That's why we bring up the Spire discussion in a sense. And same with Noah Gragson replacing Ty Dillon in the 42, a car that's 30th behind in points. Not sure what Josh Berry will do to take that step. But the real reason why I want to point that out, if you look at the grid rating for NASCAR, Josh Berry is actually 13th out of the 30 drivers who have been in the top 10 this season. Yes, he is 13th. He is ahead of a lot of drivers on this list. Daniel Suarez, obviously Chase Elliott. Denny Hamlin, he's ahead of Denny Hamlin in the grid rating. So it's Josh Berry is doing incredible things, and love to see him get great equipment. I just want to throw that out there. Maybe not as fast as Xfinity 10G, but maybe before they made the 10G update nonetheless. But we're going to throw it over. We talked, I believe, 4 motorsports today, so let's go to one of them that I don't think a lot of us got to see, unfortunately, in Australia. It was the Repco Supercars, the second race weekend of the 2023 Repco Supercars Championship. Season is in the books with 4 races in the Melbourne Super Sprint. Yes, you heard that right. There were 4 races over the course of 4 days. Many of us expected Shane van Gisbergen to dominate again and potentially sweep the weekend. He didn't do that, but we saw plenty of parity, though, with SVG. He did win at least one of the races out of the 4, so some of us got at least one pick-a-winner point nonetheless. But 2 wins for Brodie Kostecki and Brock Feeney claimed the 4th and final Super Sprint victory. Kostecki is now the points leader with a 32-point advantage over Chaz Mostert. SVG is 3rd, however, 86 points back. We're going to bring Kobe on for this one. I'm going to throw this question to you, Kobe. Does the parity at Melbourne give hopes to drivers like Kostecki, drivers like Mostert, about taking the fight to SVG all season long and potentially getting that championship?
When you look at the format for the Melbourne Super Sprint, it's a lot different than what we're used to on your typical Supercars weekend. As we know, in Supercars, they like to call themselves the main game, and they are the main game in Australia. But when Formula One comes to town, fortunately, they got to give up the title of being the main game, and they have to fall onto the support bill. So the Supercars are a support series to Formula One. And this year, when you add in Formula 3 and Formula 2, the schedule is really, really tight. So you're not given a lot of time in qualifying. You basically have to do a put up or shut up lap, have a bad lap, and you start deep in the field. There goes your race. You're probably not going to have the finish that you like. And also these races, they have to be complete in a certain amount of time since they don't have the all of the extra time that they're used to having with Formula 1, Formula 2, and Formula 3 being there. So there's not a lot, and they also have to make a pit stop during the races. So there's not a lot of time to really do anything. I think those more traditional supercar races that you see Shane van Gisbergen win all the time, I think those suit him pretty well. So I wouldn't really take what we saw this weekend in Melbourne into great consideration of where we could be championship wise, but it was really great to see the parity, see Brodie Kostecki get his very first career supercars win and backing it up with a second win just like that, and Brock Feeney getting his second supercars win it. Bring it on. I would be very excited to see a competitive supercars championship this year in 2023, and as we get deeper into the supercar season, we'll see if this will become the theme of the year, or if it's still going to be a Shane van Gisbergen show.
Absolutely. I think we saw across all motorsport, Kobe, a lot of first-time winners in a lot of separate series. So congrats to Brodie Kostecki, obviously not only getting his first win, but getting his second win as well. It's always a fun thing. A lot of motorsport action we're covering, a lot of different winners. Gotta love to see it. Unless you're a pick-a-winner person with SVG for all 4 races like Ben and myself, we saw only one. Unfortunately, I completely collapsed. I really went from second to I don't even know where I am yet, nonetheless. But I believe we're gonna head into probably the most important part of this show, in my opinion, Ben. So I'm gonna throw it to you.
Yes, well, the 2023 grid ranking is now underway. And coming into week 1, only 3 different drivers have ever led the ranking in week 1 throughout the grid ranking 6 seasons. Now in the 7th season, make that 4 drivers. And for the first time, a driver from Formula 1 leads the grid ranking in week 1. Max Verstappen leads the grid ranking for the first time ever with 2 poles, 2 wins, and 3 podium finishes in the first 3 races, plus an impressive Saudi Arabian Grand Prix going from 15th to 2nd, which earned him additional points. Amanda, Verstappen looks poised to dominate this F1 season. Do you believe anyone can mount a serious challenge to Max for the World Drivers' Championship?
Absolutely. Yeah. His teammate. So I think that Checo is obviously he had a horrible weekend, but ended up with okay results for him. But I think that we know where his head's at, especially after Saudi Arabia. He tweeted in a now deleted tweet, "It was tougher than I thought, but in the end, I'm happy to get my 5th victory in F1. Very happy with the result of the team. We're going to keep pushing hard. I want to be champion," which I think says it all in that where Checo's head's at, and that Max isn't running away with this championship just yet. And if anyone's going to take the fight to him, it'll be his own teammate.
I think that would certainly be the most likely candidate to take the fight to Max Verstappen. I just hope that Red Bull see how dominant their car is and let Sergio fight Max for the World Championship. I hope we keep team orders out of it as much as possible going forward this year. Now let's take a look at the top 10 of the grid ranking. Pato O'Ward only 0.54 away from the lead. Pato could overtake Verstappen with a good day at Long Beach. Marco Bisecki and Brodie Kostecki are in the top 10 for the first time. Sebastian Ogier is in the top 10 as well, despite not running a full season of WRC. But he has 2 wins in his 2 starts and was the 2021 grid ranking world champion. Then there's Shane van Gisbergen, the defending champion, and Pascal Wehrlein from Formula E, also up in the top 10. For the first time since 2020, SVG is not in the top 3 after only 2 wins after 6 races, and Brodie Kostecki leads SVG in podiums and top 10 finishes. Before this season, he had 5 podium finishes in 2021 and 22. This year, 4 podium finishes with a worst finish of 6th place. Kobe, is Kostecki a big surprise, and can he outlast SVG in this long supercar season?
Yeah, I'm quite surprised that by Brodie Kostecki, and especially this weekend. I didn't have him winning 1 race, but certainly not 2. I think Brodie certainly has a lot of potential, though. Him and his team, Airbus Motorsport, they've made some gains over the years, and they showed us this weekend when Shane van Gisbergen is not having an SVG like day, they can truly go out there and contend with the best in the series. Honestly, that Chaz Mostert or Cam Waters would have been the biggest competitor to SVG, but no, right now is Brodie Kostecki on top right now. But I honestly, looking at the history of Shane van Gisbergen, knowing how good Red Bull and pole racing is, I think it's going to be very hard for him to outlast Shane van Gisbergen. I think ultimately van Gisbergen is going to overtake him as we get deeper into the supercar season.
Let's take a look at the full standings for the grid ranking. For the first time, Aston Martin have both of their drivers in the grid ranking. No Ferrari drivers or George Russell at this point. Pecco Bagnaia dropped all the way from 16th, but several MotoGP riders are, of course, dealing with injuries. Only 17 started today. The highest ranked NASCAR drivers are tied for 17th at the moment. That would be William Byron and Christopher Bell. Byron only has 3 top 10 finishes, but 2 of them are wins. Bell has no wins, but 5 finishes between 3rd and 6th place out of the 7 races so far. Matthew, can Byron improve his consistency, and is this a concern for Byron not being able to finish in the top 10 more consistently?
So yes to the first question, second to the no. I think absolutely William Byron can improve on that consistency. Like I previously mentioned in this show, actually, if you look at Byron's playoff stretch, which he came around finishing 6th in the standings last season, he finished 8th, 6th, 3rd, 7th, 12th, 16th, 13th, 12th, 7th, and 6th, all in a row. If you have a worst finish of 16 in the top level of NASCAR over the course of a 10-race stretch, that is very, very, very impressive. However, he needs to find that Byron again. Granted, he didn't win during that time, and he's won twice already this season. But the problem is with him, I don't know if he'll be able to keep this up solely because when you look at consistency this season, without a win, it's Christopher Bell. I know they're tied, I believe, at the grid rating would be around like 60 points each. And a lot of that has come from Byron earning 25 points each time he wins. And then obviously finishing up in the top 10 yet again to get to 60. Christopher Bell has earned his points in pretty much 6 of the 7 races this season, or 5 of the 7, I believe. So can Byron improve his consistency? Yes. Is it a concern? Yes. I think it is a concern. I think Bell might push him to the limit. I think Bell might end at least the first couple grid rankings ahead of William Byron. So, yes, sorry.
Well, next weekend is a much lighter weekend. It's going to be Easter Sunday as NASCAR Cup Series will be racing at the Bristol Food City Dirt Race. 9 races this weekend counted towards the grid ranking. Be sure to follow @GridRanking on Twitter and gridranking.com all weekend long. Now we'll hand it back over to you, Matthew, for the one shining moment.
Absolutely. And then make sure also YouTube, I know we're going to say almost at 600 subscribers. Got to reach us there. But we're going to head into, I think, maybe one of our second favorite parts of the show. I know Pick a Winner is definitely up there. But the one shining moment of this weekend, I think this is probably the most amount of choices we've had in quite a while with the amount of motorsport action we have seen over the course of the last 3 to 4 days. So I'm going to start with you, Amanda. What is your one shining moment from this past weekend from any motorsport series that we have witnessed?
This is tough. I've got on my Lewis Hamilton shirt. Obviously, going into the weekend, I think I would have said my shining moment would have come from Formula One in Australia. But after watching the IndyCar race, I was thoroughly entertained. I think it was great to see how fast the aero McLarens were with Pato out front and Josef Newgarden pulling off the win. And I think that would have to be my one shining moment of the weekend.
And I'm going to give my one shining moment to the IndyCar Series for that great race they put on at Texas Motor Speedway today. And we know Texas, especially in most recent memory after the reconfiguration, doesn't really have a history of putting on a barn burner type of race, but I think today's race was definitely a barn burner. Really, really exciting to see all of the drivers put on a great show. Be able to use the bottom lane, the high lane, and for the drivers to be able to go up there and test that high line and show great confidence doing it, not hesitant. Like they were completely on it all the way. And the most important thing, despite running close to 220 miles per hour and all of that, everybody was able to walk away unscathed, and that's really the most important thing. I know we saw a few scary incidents, especially Graham Rahal slightly getting airborne after getting into the back of Devlin DeFrancesco. He lost control of his car at that point. IndyCar oval racing is extremely dangerous, but because it's a mere game of inches, one wrong move and it could get really bad very quickly. So for all the drivers to run as close as they did together and for nobody to get hurt, really, really glad that happened, and we all got to see a really great show at Texas in the Lone Star State. That's my great one shining moment for this week.
And I believe we have a comment in the chat room from Adam Lemery saying his one shining moment would be Josh Berry's second at Richmond and Piastri finishing in the points in his home Grand Prix. I'm going to agree with you, Adam, on the NASCAR side of things as well. Great for Josh Berry to have that second place run. But I'm going to give a call to Chandler Smith as well. Great Cup debut for him, and then obviously his win in the Xfinity race yesterday. A great weekend for him, and I think he's going to have a long-term future, great success in the sport to come his way. That's my one shining moment for this weekend on the NASCAR side of things for sure.
Yeah, and there's definitely so many to choose from. One that we won't discuss that Ben will be discussing tomorrow is, I believe, Nick Sanchez having arguably the most dominant truck race in the history without winning. Definitely maybe be up there, but in terms of what we cover here in the grid ranking, I mean, Sir Lewis Hamilton finishing on the podium and second for the first time in quite a while for him, definitely up there. I think Brodie Kostecki getting up there. I think my one shining moment, though, my main one, I know I just said like 3 or 4. I feel like I'm like Joey in the booth just clumping everything together. Nonetheless, I'm going to say Hendrick Motorsports in a couple senses. I think Josh Berry obviously finishing second, most talked about thing. But this would have been the late Ricky Hendrick, I believe, 43rd birthday today. And for Kyle Larson in the number 5 car in that paint scheme that Ricky Hendrick did drive, similar at least nonetheless. So I think that is definitely a very emotional thing. And that's why it earns the top spot, in my opinion, for this one shining moment is Kyle Larson, Hendrick Motorsports, being able to get that done on a very important day to that entire organization. So, yep, I think Hendrick Motorsports and Kyle Larson winning in that 5 paint scheme is definitely my one shining moment.
Yes, sir. Certainly, Matthew. There were a lot of great one shining moments all throughout this busy racing weekend. And let us know in the chat below, as Adam did, what's your great one shining moment from this racing weekend? And from all of our picks from Pick a Winner, I think I might be tied with there it is. I'm tied with Ed for the lead now. I told you Ed I was coming for you, and now I'm there. But fun story. If you watch yesterday's pre-race show, who did I pick for Formula One? I picked George Russell. I thought Max Verstappen was going to have one of those rare races where things didn't go well. So if I'd been like everybody else and picked Max Verstappen, I would be the leader right now in Pick a Winner. So I'm kind of kicking myself for that. And hopefully once we get to the end of the year, it doesn't end up biting me in the rear end. And tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern time, be sure to check out Ben, Brandon Crossland, and everyone else who are going to be a part of Grid Live Encore, recapping the trucks at Texas, Xfinity at Richmond, Formula 2 and Formula 3 at Melbourne, and a lot more. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. At the moment, we're only 5 subscribers away from hitting 600. Tell your friends about the Grid Network and get them to subscribe as well. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get the notifications. Follow us all across our social media platforms and visit gridranking.com. Take 5 minutes to invest in Grid Network through Patreon. Join Colin, Mark, Deschelle, Robin, and David investing each month in the Grid Network. We encourage you to join the amazing group of people. Keep us in there. Once we hit $500 per month, we can start expanding our coverage, adding new members to the team, and increase the Grid Network presence on site, covering the races from the track, and more content. Link in the video description. And if you also want to do a one-time donation, click on the Buy Me a Coffee link. You can get your name on the board and invest as much as you can and often as you want. Consider buying a specific on-air personality a cup of coffee, and I'll thank you right here on the air. And we're out of time for the night. So for Ben Snyder, Matthew Burrow, and Amanda Kaufman, I'm Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish. Thank you all for watching, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.